Welcome back, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to another reading of What Makes a Monster and What Makes a Man. This is Chapter 7. Summary. Raid the Gravity Falls jail, they can't stop us all. The phone lines were down. Dipper was relieved that he didn't have to worry about the sword lady coming for him. The Pines family could do this. They knew the local jail and had practiced breaking out, and this time they would have the advantage of starting outside a cell. The issue was with the government agents. Interacting with them ran the risk of restoring their memories. Thankfully, Dipper had thought through several different versions of the agents returning over the past year. He needed to be prepared in case something happened and they were in trouble. Bill was unpredictable, but the government was, which meant he could make plans for how to deal with it. None of them had involved Stephen in the calculations, but as long as Stephen stayed in place and did not talk, the plans had a chance of succeeding. They were doomed. Dipper needed to come up with a plan. He had to fix his mistake. Unless there was a way to override the government, a jailbreak was required, and if the agents remembered them, they would try to arrest them all, and they were locked away forever, imprisoned like Bill. And then who would stop Bill if he managed to come back? The government could make them disappear, erase any traces of the Pine family, just like they had with Quentin Tremblay. Wait a minute. Override the government? Quentin Tremblay. That could work. It was ridiculous, but so were the gnomes living in the forest. So were yellow triangle demons. Never mind all that. So was Steven Universe having been involved in a war. All they needed was time to get set up. Wendy was the one who came up with the distraction. We get a big group and storm the jail. They can't stop us all. If we tell people it'll keep the government from poking around, they'll be more than happy to help. Some of the people gathered outside the jail, wanting the government gone. Mabel took off her sweater. Some wanted to cause chaos. Dipper put on a pair of dark sunglasses. Some had met Steven Universe and wanted to help him out. Dipper flipped through his notebook till he found what he needed and put it in his wallet. The police station got numerous prank calls. Ford tried calling the number Steven had given again. Tires were slashed. Soos found a powdered wig in an old trunk. Old Man McGucket drove his latest robot monster down Main Street. Stan used his knowledge on the legal system to come up with a release statement. Mabel was dressed in robes and a powdered wig. Dipper wore a suit similar to those of the agents. Ford had equipped them both with taser guns. They were not back in 20 minutes. Grunkle Stan was going to take his brass knuckles and get them out.
"Excuse me, officers, but can you inform us as to what is going on here?"
All he had to do was follow the plan, keep calm, and play it cool. Dipper could do this. He had to do this. "We don't have time for kids playing dress-up. Get lost." Agent Power was just like Dipper remembered him. "Yeah, get lost, kids." So was Agent Trigger.
"I beg your pardon, I am no mere child. I am Congresswoman Mabel, appointed by President Sir Lord Quentin Tremblay III, Esquire. Now, as my bodyguard asked, what is going on here?"
Bodyguard? Mabel stepped on his foot before he could say anything else, before he could mess everything else up again, before he could make things worse for Stephen than they already were. "Seeing as the 8.5 President of the United States, who does not exist, is not here to prove your claim, the answer is still no." Dipper pulled out his wallet. "Is this enough proof for you, or do you need more?" "A negative $12 bill. This is worthless." "It's less than worthless." "And I believe it is more than enough proof of my connection to Quentin. Now, release the suspect at once." "With all due respect, Congresswoman Mabel, there is no record of this man anywhere in our files. He is likely an illegal alien." "But why did you come here to arrest him? Has he done anything wrong? What are the charges? Why was he taken into custody?" "He came willingly when we said we would leave the town alone if he went with us. He seems to be unable to leave the town. Every time we try, our vehicles slow down and they're unable to move forward entirely. He cannot pass beyond the town limits." "Then he is of no threat to anybody. He has shown no ill intent in the time he has been here and cannot leave. There is no issue. Release the suspect and I shall handle the rest. There was recently a UFO sighting in Kentucky that you need to go investigate." "But he—" "Go. Investigate." Stephen was released. The agents were packed up and ready to move out. All Dipper had to do now was admit to Stephen that he had called the government to have him arrested. Admit that he had messed everything up. That he had ruined everyone's day because he was blind and stupid. "Stephen, Dipper was spared having to explain himself when Mabel's newly bedazzled sweater launched itself at Agent Trigger. The sweater was moving on its own. The sleeves raised as if for boxing. The agents reached for the guns. This was bad. And why was the sweater moving? The journals hadn't mentioned anything on moving clothing, had they? Stephen looked suspiciously at the sweater.
Mabel, what did you attach to the sweater? Some cool rocks I found last summer. When the wax statues melted, these shiny rocks were left behind. I collected them, put them in a shoebox, and forgot all about it till I found them when I was cleaning out your room. Okay, this might seem like a strange question, but did any of these wax statues happen to be alive? How did Stephen know about the statues? What did they have to do with Mabel's sweater? Yeah, all of them. Did you say anything to the sweater after you bedazzled it? What did that have to do with anything? I think I mentioned that help dealing with the agents would be nice while I was getting changed. Stephen groaned. Okay, I know what this is. I've dealt with something like it before. As long as we can grab the sweater, the situation can be resolved quickly. Fire! The agent started shooting, and the sweater was blown apart. Are you kidding me? Stephen was far too familiar with combat. Snatching gem shards off the pieces of string that were attacking the agents, being able to avoid flailing arms that were trying to fight enchanted yarn. But he could still use help. Dipper looked at Mabel and nodded. The two of them charged towards the agents, only for Stephen to hand them the shards he had collected. Don't let these touch any clothing or fabric and stay out of the fight. Why did Stephen not want their help? They could handle themselves. They were young, but they had seen combat before. But so had Stephen. Great Uncle Ford had said Stephen was involved in a gem war, and this was a gem fight. Dipper didn't have the journals to tell him what to do. He was useless and worthless. He messed everything up. Mabel pressed a worm on a string into his hand. He hadn't noticed her getting it out. Breathe and focus on the feeling of the worm. Breathe. Breathe. Stephen swiftly collected all the gem shards that were harassing the agents. He came over and took the ones Mabel was holding. Dipper had dropped his at some point. Was it before or after Mabel had distracted him? Stephen picked up the shards from the ground, then trapped them all in a pink bubble, just like Bill had done to Mabel. Trapped with no way out, and people were being frozen, and Bill was free, and he had to save Mabel, and never mind all that. The agents were looking at Stephen suspiciously. Some had already turned their guns towards him. Mabel, being a congresswoman, would not be enough to protect him now. Stephen was undisturbed by the glares. He looked at the bubble of gem shards. Is that all of them? Larry King's head lives in the vents of the Mystery Shack, but he seems happy there, Mabel supplied. Okay then. Stephen tapped the top of the bubble and it vanished. He pulled out his phone and tried to call someone. The phone seemed to be working again since the call went through. Hey, Garnet, I just sent a bubble, some carnelian shards, but I don't know if it managed to get out of the barrier. Can you check? Okay, thanks. Love you too. Bye. He looked at the twins. Problem solved. Yellow can fix her up, and then she can move forward. Yellow, like Bill. But Stephen was connected to gems, not Bill. Unless he was connected with him, or Bill was connected with gems. Dipper squeezed the worm on a string. You're coming with us. Agent Power seemed to have recovered from being attacked by an overly bedazzled sweater. You are under arrest. So had Agent Trigger. Do not resist. You can't arrest me. Diplomatic immunity. Now, I believe a member of Congress told you to leave. And which country are you from that grants your diplomatic immunity? You're not in any of the records. You should be taken into custody, until we find that, at least. Stephen pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm the former Earth Ambassador for the Great Diamond Authority. The events that occurred today are my responsibility, so why don't you leave before I have to contact anyone? That did the trick. Within 5 minutes, it was as if the agents had never been there in the first place. Dipper tried not to come up with reasons for the government knowing about the Diamond Authority, like how it could be a national cover-up, or brainwashing, or both. Never mind all that. He was being paranoid. There was nothing to worry about. Grunkle Stan and Great Uncle Ford joined the teenagers. So, what did you think of jail, kid? Stephen laughed. It was better than the last time I got arrested. There wasn't even a murder trial. That's all for Chapter 7. At the end, the author notes that the wax statues were cursed to come alive during the waxing moon, and carnelians have links to the waxing moon, as well as canonically being made on Earth, which is cool little Easter egg. I really like that. Anyways, here's the summary for Chapter 8. We'll win the fight and then go out for pizzas, and be plagued by various traumatic events. At least now I know that saying I have diplomatic immunity works. Dipper had questions. Several questions. But he couldn't ask them. He had hurt Stephen enough, caused enough pain for the day. He could never make up for all that he had done, but he could apologize. Stephen, I called the cops, and it was dumb and stupid of me, and I put everyone at risk, and I messed this up, but I won't let it happen again, and I'm sorry, and... Stephen raised his hand, and Dipper fell silent.
Dipper, when you undergo a traumatic experience, it clouds your judgment. Believe me, I know. You calling the government wasn't a smart idea. Neither was following me when I was having a panic attack, but nobody was injured, and I have a support system in place. I will be fine. Will you? Dipper had no clue what Stephen was talking about. He was fine. I suppose we both owe each other explanations. Ford looked around at all the townspeople. Why don't we go back to the Mystery Shack and discuss this there? I don't really want to go into detail, but I'm half Gem. Gems are an intergalactic race that used to conquer other planets. They tried to conquer Earth, but a rebellion fought back, and the Earth colony was abandoned. My mom was the leader, and she and the Crystal Gems lived on Earth for a couple thousand years. Then she met my dad and gave up her physical form to make me. The Great Diamond Authority used to rule over the Gems, but they ended up converting to democracy, and now there is peace across the universe. Stephen recounted the points on his fingers. Then he looked at them all. You each get one question, but I don't have to answer it if I don't want to. Somehow it was Wendy who went first. You said your mom was the leader, right? Which side did she fight for? Was she part of the rebellion, or did she get stuck on Earth? Dipper thought back to the video. Stephen was Pink Diamond, which meant his mom must have been trapped on Earth when the other Gems abandoned the colony. But the Keep Beach City Weird blog had said that the Crystal Gems were the rebellion. They must have been very forgiving to accept an enemy into their ranks. Yes. That made no sense. How could Pink Diamond have been the leader for both sides? Perhaps she had climbed the Crystal Gem rankings after they took her in? Stan spoke up next. You doing okay after being arrested? Yeah, it wasn't the first time, and I do have a therapy appointment in a few days. I'll talk about it then. Grunkle Stan nodded, and Mabel leapt up from her spot on the floor. How did the trail go? Who did you murder? Wait, that's 2 questions. Stephen's face went slack for a moment. Then he shook his head. They thought I had murdered my mom after she faked her death and pretended to be her own murderer, but I didn't know that at the time. And I managed to escape and get back to Earth with help from Lars, who died. How have I not brought that up before? Stephen typed something into his phone. Who's next? What had made Stephen pause? Was he actually a murderer? He had been part of a war. It made sense that he had fought, but to actually kill someone. Dipper shivered. The room felt colder. What was going on with Mabel's sweater that allowed it to be animated? Great Uncle Ford seemed to have managed to decide on a question. Shattered gems. They still have bits of gem consciousness inside of them, so they can be attached to inanimate objects and transformed into soldiers. Mabel accidentally activated it when she said she needed help fighting. But nowadays those are rare. Most gem shards on Earth were used to form the cluster. You'll be more likely to run into a corrupted gem. They're gems that were damaged by the diamonds and transformed into monsters. There haven't been any sights of one in the area, but there is a crashed ship nearby. If you see one, come get me. I'll deal with it. Corrupted gems were monsters. Stephen had to fight these monsters that were once like him. And Dipper had called Stephen a monster. No wonder he had freaked out. Dipper had said he was like creatures he had been raised to fight. If someone told Dipper that he was like Bill... Never mind all that. Dipper, is everything okay? Stephen was looking at him in concern. Yeah, I was just thinking. Dipper needed a question to ask. There were so many floating around his brain. How did Stephen's powers work? How early had he started fighting in the war? What were these other planets like? How exactly did the war end? What was up with that video where Stephen was a member of the Diamond Authority? What made the Diamond switch from tyrants like Bill to democracy? Were the gems connected at all to Bill? Were they working with him? Was Stephen here to free him? Have you heard of a blog called Keep Beach City Weird? Stupid question. He was an idiot. Now Stephen knew he had read the blog and was unlikely to learn anything useful. Dipper had wasted his question, just like he had wasted everyone's time today by calling the government on a child soldier who was trying to move forward. He was a horrible person. Stephen groaned. Of course you managed to find Ronaldo's blog. Most of the events he covered happened, but he tends to jump to conclusions. He once tried to convince me, who grew up and fought alongside the Crystal Gems, that Gemkind wanted to hollow out the Earth. Stephen blinked a couple times. Though, with the cluster, I guess he was right. Take everything he says with a grain of salt, and if you want to find out about what was actually happening, you can ask me later. But the same rule applies. If I don't want to talk, I don't have to. Soos raised his hand. Very important, time-critical, pressing question. What do you want for dinner tonight? You get arrested, you'll get to pick the meal. Stephen smiled. Does Gravity Falls have any fish? As per Stephen's request, Soos fried up some fish and ordered a pizza. Then Stephen proved he was a despicable monster. He put the fish on the pizza and took a bite. "We used to get fish stew pizza after a mission in order to celebrate," he said, noticing the looks he was getting. "Sounds tasty." Mabel copied Stephen and took a bite. "I guess now it's my turn to ask a question. What is going on with this town? Those shards were the first gem activity I've seen here, but this place feels like Beach City, which means something is up." They could not talk about Bill. That was against the rules. Since when did the Pines family care about the law? No, never mind all that. Dipper could talk about Gravity Falls without talking about Bill.
Great Uncle Ford beat him to it. Gravity Falls is a hotspot for weirdness and anomalies. Though with your arrival, I am now curious as to whether these anomalies originated in Gravity Falls or passing through and got trapped in the barrier. He grabbed a pen and started writing on a paper napkin, muttering to himself. Dipper owed Stephen an explanation. He could do this. He just had to avoid mentioning Bill. There are gnomes and monsters made of candy and Old Man McGucket and manitars and billions of other strange things. There used to be journals filled with notes on the events, but they were destroyed in an incident last summer. There are all sorts of crazy adventures you can go on, Mabel added helpfully. It's scary, but fun. How life-threatening are these adventures? Jumping off cliffs, ghosts at the convenience store, almost being sent to Washington, time travel, Gideon taking over the shack, the shapeshifter, the memory gun, opening the portal, Great Uncle Ford almost being fired into space, Mabel trapped in a bubble. Bill? Are you getting help? Stephen must have taken their silence as an answer. Mabel nodded. Me, Candy, and Grenda video chat every other week to talk about stuff that happened. Grenda's mom is a psychologist, and she gives us advice on how to process everything. Mabel was seeing a psychologist? Why did he not know about this? Why did she not tell him? They were supposed to be in this together, the mystery twins against the world, but she had never told him. Never mind all that. It's fine. I don't need any help. I can deal with it on my own. Stephen didn't look convinced, but he dropped the subject. The conversation drifted to the earlier jailbreak and laughter about the agents' faces. Dipper did not contribute. Lying in bed that night, Dipper tossed and turned. He didn't need help. He was doing fine on his own. He could help himself. Stephen had clearly been through worse, and Stephen was doing well, which meant Dipper could be fine. He wound the worm on a string around his fingers. He was fine. Bill taking over his body, never mind all that. He was fine. Racing Bill inside Grunkle Stan's mind, never mind all that. Bill wanting to tear him and Mabel apart? Dipper was trapped, and everyone was suffering, and he and Mabel were about to die, and never mind all that. When Dipper finally managed to fall asleep, he dreamt. He was surrounded by inky blackness. There was a yellow glow behind him. Hey there, pine tree. And that's the end of the chapter. I really like this one. Anyways, chapters 9 and 10 will be up soon. Thank you so much for listening. Patch out.